รายการต่อไปนี้เป็นรายการทั่วไปสามารถรับชมได้ทุกวัย
สวัสดีค่ะเมื่อไม่นานมานี้คุณอลัน ยาโรนายกเทศมนตรีเขตเศรษฐกิจการค้าแห่งกรุงลอนดอนเดินทางมาเยือนประเทศไทยนะคะเพื่อกระชับความสัมพันธ์ระหว่างลอนดอนสหราชอาณาจักรและประเทศไทยค่ะรายการมองเรามองโลกได้มีโอกาสพูดคุยกับคุณอลันเกี่ยวกับตำแหน่งของเขานะคะซึ่งเป็นตำแหน่งที่มีมายาวนานกว่า800ปีแล้วรวมถึงความสำคัญของกรุงลอนดอนในฐานะที่เป็นเมืองชั้นนำระดับโลกและเป็นศูนย์กลางทางการเงินลอนดอนทำอย่างไรถึงจะคงความสำคัญของตัวเองได้มายาวนานจนถึงปัจจุบันและต่อไปในอนาคตประเทศไทยรวมถึงลอนดอนและสหราชอาณาจักรจะสามารถร่วมมือกันด้านการค้าการลงทุนได้ในแง่มุมไหนบ้างไปฟังกันค่ะ City of London หรือเขตเศรษฐกิจการค้ากรุงลอนดอนเป็นเขตที่มีความสำคัญมายาวนานของสหราชอาณาจักรบางครั้งเรียกสั้นๆว่า The City หรือ Square Mile เนื่องจากมีพื้นที่เล็กๆเพียง 1.12 ตารางไมล์หรือประมาณ 2.5 ตารางกิโลเมตรปัจจุบันมีผู้อยู่อาศัยราว 7,000 คนแต่มีผู้คนถึง 387,000 คนทำงานที่นี่ทุกวันเพราะที่นี่ถือเป็นศูนย์กลางทางการค้าและการเงินที่สำคัญมากที่สุดแห่งหนึ่งของโลกเขตเศรษฐกิจการค้ากรุงลอนดอนมีหน่วยงานท้องถิ่นของตัวเองชื่อว่า City of London Corporation ซึ่งนำโดย Lord Mayor of the City of London หรือนายกเทศมนตรีเขตเศรษฐกิจการค้ากรุงลอนดอนเมื่อวันที่ 7 พฤศจิกายน 2557 ที่ผ่านมาอลัน ยาโรวัย 64 ปีได้เข้ารับตำแหน่งนายกเทศมนตรีเขตเศรษฐกิจการค้ากรุงลอนดอนคนที่ 687
Lord Mayor, let's start with your title.
Yes.
So you're the Lord Mayor of the City of London and not the Mayor of London. What's
Correct.
the difference?
The difference is that the Mayor of London has a political position and the Lord Mayor of London has no political position. The Lord Mayor actually the title goes back to the 13th century, effectively when the Magna Carta, just before the Magna Carta, a mayoral charter was passed by King John in 1215, and that was further confirmed by the Magna Carta 1 month later. So it goes back a long way. So coming up for 800 years, the office has been around for.
Wow, so the responsibilities of the Lord Mayor today and back then, have
different.
the responsibilities evolved?
Yes, they're very different now. I mean, then the Lord Mayor effectively was the person next to the King. He was the people's representative of London. London then was a much smaller city, and it basically was across London Bridge, and the London city was on the other side, the northern side of the Thames. It was a much smaller city than it is now. Now the city still exists. It's called the City of London. It's about a square mile. It has about 7,000 residents, but 387,000 people come and work there every day. And they're all basically a cluster of people involved in financial services and supporting professional services in the finance area. Mm-hmm. So the Lord Mayor's position is to represent those people who are in the financial services sector. The electoral process is slightly different. In the whole of the UK, the democratic process is one man, one vote. But the local elections in the City of London has a different structure. If you're a resident, you have one vote. Mm-hmm. But if you have a business, for roughly every 10 people you employ, you have one vote as well. So the businesses have a voice. And that London, my position here is to actually speak not only to the city, but for the city, on issues which are of commercial interest. So I focus directly on non-political issues, but to do with business and to do with finance.
หน้าที่หนึ่งของนายกเทศมนตรีเขตเศรษฐกิจการค้ากรุงลอนดอนคือการเดินทางไปยังประเทศต่างๆเพื่อประชาสัมพันธ์ลอนดอนในฐานะเมืองแห่งการเป็นผู้นำทางด้านการเงินและการบริการทางธุรกิจระดับโลกเมื่อเร็วๆนี้คุณอลัน ยาโรได้เดินทางมาประเทศสมาชิกอาเซียน 6 ประเทศรวมถึงประเทศไทยเพื่อมากระชับความสัมพันธ์และความร่วมมือกันด้านการเงินและการให้บริการทางวิชาชีพที่มีประสิทธิภาพ
So you're here in Bangkok to sell London.
Indeed. and the financial services which London can offer to support Thailand in its next stage of development.
In which particular ways do you want to sell London to Bangkok in this trip?
Well, I mean, you've got a fantastic country here. It's grown a lot in the course of the last 10, 15 years. I had a business here 15 years ago. And the reality is that you've reached a stage now where you need to go to that next leap forward. And the real question is, what are the bottlenecks inside the economy that's going to stop Thailand actually not achieving its ultimate aim? Your GDP per capita at the moment is still quite low when compared to the Western economies. And the reality is that you've got all the skills here and you've got all the ambition to try and get up to the same level of the Western economies. And we're here to come and support you to try and achieve that.
In what ways?
Well, it's to do with education, training and qualifications, identifying which particular skill gaps are missing, also to identify attitudes and approaches to business. It's actually critically important, for example, that you have speedy legal dispute resolution. It's important also that you have a recognised financial system for reporting figures, and actually it is of high quality professional basis. It's important that your life insurance companies have good actuarial support. It's looking at the professions which actually make Thailand a global participant rather than being someone who's coming up from the emerging markets. So it's looking at professionalising parts of the business in which you're involved in.
Now, the city of London is a very attractive city, but the cost of living is very high and it rises every year. Would this somehow reduce the attractiveness of the city?
Inevitably, it's an economic discussion. But you will find actually that the UK is still highly competitive in most of the professional areas, if not considerably cheaper. I mean, the important point about this is, and people don't realise this, that McKinsey did a recent report. If you are a company which effectively has the same transparency in its accounting and its legal processes, the valuation of your paper will have a premium of 22% above those that don't. In other words, your cost of capital is cheaper. So what we offer in London is the best professional services, which means you as a company can actually have a lower cost of capital to make sure you can actually do your business well and better and cheaper and more profitably. And that is very valuable.
Compared to other cities around the world, how do you perceive yourself or how do you want other people to see the city?
As a cultural a place which is effectively accepting of foreign people, number one. It's got a very plural society. I challenge anybody to find another city in the world that has got such a low barrier of entry and acceptance as London has. That's point number one. Point number two, it's got very good educational processes. The schools now are getting a lot better. The private schools are exceptional. The universities are top dollar. They are without doubt the top universities. Of the top 10, top 3 of them effectively are UK universities. Nobel Peace Prizes, I think I'm probably right in saying that we get probably twice as many per capita as the United States. So in the fact of the day is that in the intellectual and academic side, we're above, if not considerably ahead of most of the opposition. Combined with that, the way of life in London is fantastic. You've got great cultural, you've got theatres, you've got great opera. It's a great open society for restaurants and everything else. I think you'll find most people like being in London.
Is London the most important city in Europe?
Oh, I think it's the most important city in the world, but that's my view.
Why? Why do you think it's the most important city in the world?
Well, because I think it has got all those features which I think make life fun to live. And actually it's safety, it's entertainment, and it's challenging. And equally, there is a caring side of society, which is also important. That one must look to see actually how those people who are less lucky than oneself are also looked after. We did a recent analysis actually about volunteering in the UK, and volunteering in the sense of actually people giving their time for nothing for other people's benefit. And we calculated that the actual value to the country was probably somewhere in the 25 to 35 billion pounds sterling per annum. If you then looked at actually how that person benefits themselves from doing something like that, their well-being, you could almost double that because they turn up to work earlier, they work harder, and they enjoy their job. So it's about the all-round holistic view about how to live in the UK. And that's what's important. It's art, it's culture, it's challenge, it's work, and it's fun.
A lot of other cities in the world also sell themselves in the same way, more or less. New York, Tokyo, Paris, Berlin, name it. So how do you keep up with competition, being a global leading city?
Well, I mean, I think we can't be doing that badly. We're now at our record population in London. We're probably going to go up to another 25% in the course of the next 5-10 years. So there is a huge pressure at the moment. If you look at the property prices, also property prices are far too expensive at the moment. Again, that's a function of demand. So if you look at the supply and demand features, London's not doing too badly actually.
ในการจัดอันดับศูนย์กลางการเงินของโลกของหลายสำนักลอนดอนกับนิวยอร์กจะสลับกันเป็นแชมป์อันดับหนึ่งของโลกขึ้นอยู่กับวิธีการและเกณฑ์ในการจัดอันดับแต่แม้นิวยอร์กและลอนดอนจะยังคงตำแหน่งศูนย์กลางการเงินอันดับต้นๆของโลกแต่ก็ต้องรับมือกับศูนย์กลางการเงินหน้าใหม่ที่กำลังมาแรงจากฝั่งเอเชีย
As a financial center as well for London, there are other financial centers around the world. Now, how do you keep up with competition here?
It's innovation. It's about being able to deliver. It's about reminding yourself that the customer comes first. Good advice. People will come back because they can trust the advice. And trusting advice is extremely important.
Do you think that the world's economy today, the dynamism has shifted somehow to Asia, and maybe the UK is more or less not relevant anymore, but maybe people look toward like Shanghai, Hong Kong, this part of the world?
I think the Far East is very exciting. I think it's a phenomenal story, and I think that a lot of people will be putting a lot of their money in the region here. After all, we've probably got a GDP per capita of $35,000 per capita. In Thailand, I think it's about 5,700, that sort of area. There's a big gap, and that gap is potential growth for this region. So, you know, we handle probably about $2 to $3 trillion of foreign money for investment overseas every year. And we're looking for those growth economies. So we too also find the region exciting. Just because we happen to be London doesn't mean we don't look outside. We are an international financial centre. We've only got 65 million people in our country. And we have a business, a financial services business, which is 3 to 4 times larger than that because we spend our time doing business outside the UK. We spend our time doing business down here, effectively in Thailand. We spend our time doing business in America. We are a global centre, so we don't have a great loyalty to one particular geographic region. We'll go where we think the growth is greatest and where the assurity of delivery is greatest.
How do you keep your relevance? Because some centers, they might rise and they might fall, but London is still around.
Yes, well, that's a very good question. I think it comes down quite often to things like law. You know, when you buy something through English law, you know you own it, and it's not disputable. So consequently, I think the reality is that it's the renewal process of a democratic system. It is the process of the legal system. Is it trusted? It's the language. Do you understand it? All these things, they all basically sit very comfortably in London.
ที่ผ่านมาประเทศตะวันตกหรือเมืองใหญ่ในยุโรปต้องรับมือกับภัยจากการก่อการร้ายมากขึ้นเช่นการกราดยิงสำนักพิมพ์นิตยสารล้อเลียนเสียดสีชาลีเอฟโดที่กรุงปารีสประเทศฝรั่งเศสรวมถึงการกราดยิงวงเสวนาเรื่องเสรีภาพในการแสดงออกและชุมชนชาวยิวในกรุงโคเปนเฮเกนประเทศเดนมาร์ก
Is London safe considering what happened in Paris and Denmark?
You could say that about any city at the moment. I mean, there are radical people everywhere, fundamentalists everywhere. I don't want to predict anything. I think we've had our own problems. We've always had problems. I feel very sorry for those people in Paris, and I feel extremely sorry for those people in Denmark, in Copenhagen. I'm afraid that's the reality of life. That's going to happen almost anywhere. But the reality is people do feel safe in London, but there is a terrorist threat in every single Western country at the moment.
In general, how is the economy of the UK doing today?
The economy is doing fine. It's 2.9% GDP growth at the moment. It's probably going to go a bit better again next year, or for this year effectively, because we've got the oil price, which has come the way of all consumers. But we have an election coming up in May, and that's going to be interesting. And it's going to be a 5-horse race, and we're not sure what the conclusion is going to be. And like a time of any political uncertainty, that tends to have an impact on people's decision making. Most businessmen want to have stability and predictability, and elections quite often can confuse them. So short term, they put their hands back in their pockets. So we hope that's not going to happen. We hope that there'll be enough energy put through from the oil price, which actually will take the economy through the first quarter of the year.
Confusion or maybe a little bit of excitement.
Oh, whichever way you want to look at it. Challenge, anyway.
Now, the Greece is debt crisis. How does that impact the UK? Any impact at all?
Oh, I mean, Greece is without doubt a very serious event. I mean, we are not part of the euro. However, our biggest consuming market is Europe. You know, we are European, we're not part of the euro. Any impact on the European market has an impact on the UK. So we're pleased we're not part of the euro because the euro's got problems of its own. But equally, we'd like our friends and colleagues in Europe to actually find a solution to the Greek problem. And it's going to be difficult. It's not an easy position. But again, I'm philosophical about these things. That, you know, a new currency has to be tested. And a new currency has to be tested in crisis. And the euro is being tested.
What interesting financial trends do you see for this year, 2015?
I think it's fascinating. We've got interest rates at the lowest possible level you can get. I mean, the Thai interest rates are now falling quite rapidly. The baht's been quite strong. So I think we have an interesting situation where commodity prices are falling, oil prices down. Okay, it's recovered a bit from sort of $40 to $60, but that's just purely a bounce, a technical bounce, I suspect. But we're beginning to see the impact of falling costs coming into the world economy, and that is good for growth. So I think we'll begin to see a stronger, more robust form of growth coming through over the course of this year, just globally, and that will have a good impact on the economy, the world economy. However, interest rates are low, and when interest rates are low, people search for yield. And when people search for yield, they effectively take bigger risk. So the fact that interest rates are low isn't necessarily a good thing. One's got to look to the fact actually that we've got to be very careful when you're looking for a return that you're not increasing the disproportionate amount of risk you're taking. And that's something we should have learned through 2008, 2007, 2008. But the same elements of low interest rates are around now that were around then. They're actually even lower. So the requirement for yield is even greater. And it's up to the regulators to make sure that the innovative products that are being produced are ones which are transparent and easily understandable, and we don't get to the complexities we were before.
It sounds that London and the UK in general, everything is going very well. Economy is doing fine. The city is having nice infrastructure projects and on time as well. Everyone has a job. People volunteer their time. No roadblocks at all? No challenges at all?
We have an election coming up.
Well, that's normal.
Yes, but it's going to be unusual because they're going to be. Normally, you have two parties. We have five now, and so we now look as if we're going to go through another period of coalition. And England and Britain likes to have clear leadership from one party normally, so we're going to have to go through another period of change, which is a challenge, and it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's democracy working its way through.
People have more choices.
Exactly.
You don't sound very keen about having more political parties or more players in the political field.
It's clarity. It's all about direction and clarity. And as soon as you have more political parties in the field, it becomes more confusing. So the reality is that finance and business want predictability and clarity and transparency. And so when politics comes in, quite often, it can confuse. So the reality is, let's get through the election, let's see what we've got at the other side of it, and we'll see how we actually unwind and how we actually go forward for the rest of the year. I think it looks very good myself. The atmosphere is good, people are enthusiastic, and the youth are very well educated, and it's a fantastic place to be.
What's your vision for London in, say, 10 years' time?
London will be probably about 10 million people strong. It's going to go up by about 20%. It'll be very diverse. It'll have very many different nationalities. London is the most extraordinary place where everybody feels that they can actually express themselves. And that's something which we cherish, actually, and we welcome. And so I think we'll still be a very exciting place. in the future.
ถึงแม้ว่าทุกวันนี้มีหลายเมืองของโลกนะคะที่มีความสำคัญขึ้นมาแล้วก็เป็นศูนย์กลางทางการเงินที่น่าสนใจด้วยแต่ว่ากรุงลอนดอนนั้นซึ่งเป็นเมืองเก่าแก่ก็ยังมองข้ามไม่ได้นะคะเพราะว่ามีศักยภาพสูงมากแล้วก็มีชื่อเสียงที่ดีในแง่ของการเป็นศูนย์กลางทางการเงินมายาวนานค่ะสำหรับประเทศไทยเองก็ต้องมาพิจารณานะคะว่ามีแง่มุมไหนที่จะร่วมมือกับลอนดอนหรือว่าสหราชอาณาจักรโดยรวมได้เพื่อที่จะทำให้เกิดประโยชน์สูงสุดกับทั้งสองประเทศค่ะพบกันใหม่สัปดาห์หน้าวันนี้สวัสดีค่ะ